Cheat activated. Cheat activated. Cheat activated. Cheat activated.
Hello? Hello?
Cheat activated.
Oh, hi.
Cheat act.
Kind of become Peter's enemy and set up some very interesting conflict. But there is another option out there that could do what I think the MCU does best, is like have its cake and eat it too. Be able to maintain the status quo of both Peter and Ned being friends, but also having a Ned Leeds version of the Hobgoblin. And the only way for that is obviously the multiverse. As we've talked about before, and a lot of people have talked about before, is like the multiverse is going to be a huge part of the MCU going forward. We're going to see the seeds in Phase 4, and then it's going to be a major player in Phase 5 and Phase 6 and beyond. The multiverse is the thing. We know that Doctor Strange is going to be in Spider-Man's sequel. We know that Electro's coming back, which implies that Spider-Man is taking a trip to the multiverse. If Peter's hopping worlds and the world that he goes to, if in the Sonyverse itself, the version of Hobgoblin is Ned Leeds, that would be interesting, because then Peter would be up against an enemy that he thinks he knows, because he thinks he knows Ned, and he would try to save him, would try to help him, would try to see the good in him. But if this version of Ned Leeds that's in a different universe is just completely evil to its core, how does Peter fight against something like that? Would Peter stick to his guns and do what he did with the Vulture and, try to see the good in him and save him no matter what, or realize that his friend's lost? How do you think Peter would respond to a different multiverse Ned Leeds?
Well, I think this multiverse concept is so interesting with the MCU, because you can essentially give us villains, give us characters, without having to show us any of their backstory. You can give us a villain and say, hey, you missed their backstory, it happened in a different universe. For Peter Parker, this Peter Parker that we know, to show up in a different universe and come across Ned Leeds as the Hobgoblin, you have to think that in that universe, something happened where Ned and Peter were either never friends or they were friends for a while and there was a major divide in their relationship. All that still happened, but this Peter hasn't experienced it. So it's really interesting to see that Peter knows Ned as a certain way, but this Ned he will be going up against knows a different Peter a certain way. So it's also interesting to think of that from that sort of point of view, that mirror concept point of view, because the question is going to be, can Peter separate his feelings from the Ned he knows versus the Ned that's in front of him? And I love this concept for all characters. Like, I'm so excited for characters to venture into other universes and see versions of characters that they've come to know and how they're going to do it.
I agree with it. I think that opens up a whole avenue of different storytelling options. And first and foremost, keeps it on the character level. It's not just interesting to see these different versions of characters, it's interesting to see how the characters we've come to know and love respond to these different versions of characters. And that's where you're going to get your really dramatic heft, that's where you're going to get the really good storytelling option to see this different variety of characters that we're familiar with that are slightly different, and see how our characters, our OGs, respond. Now I'm so torn between which version of Ned Leeds as the Hobgoblin that I want to see. Because overall, what this conversation is totally enforcing me, I want to see Ned Leeds as the Hobgoblin. I want to see him in a glider, in a scary, yellowish, Halloweenish mask, flying around and causing trouble for Peter. I'm just not sure which version I want to see, because I think all options really create fascinating story avenues for the future. Which, out of all of them, which one would you prefer?
Well, I will say that that multiverse option we sort of talked about, there's already precedence in the MCU for it. Look at Gamora. Gamora is a different universe version of herself living in this current universe. I'm really excited to see where that story goes, but she doesn't even know Peter anymore. Like, that's the relationship I'm talking about. You saw it briefly during the final battle in Endgame, but Peter's like, I thought I lost you, and Gamora's like, I don't even know you.
Yeah.
So that's the interesting kind of dynamic and relationships I'm excited to see. So I think the multiverse option is the one that is best set up right now, especially if they're going to be doing elements of Spider-Verse. I talk that other Spider-Men are going to be in it. But if you're asking me right now, I really like the idea of taking Jacob Batalon's Ned Leeds, as we know him, and playing up the fact that he has spent all this time by Peter's side. Maybe Peter neglects him a little bit, or maybe Peter, spends more time with MJ, and it leads Ned to a path where he wants to better himself. He doesn't feel useful to Peter anymore because maybe MJ's his guy in the chair now, or gal in the chair, whatever the technical term is. And now Ned feels like he needs to better himself, and so he shows us how smart of a character he is, and he creates the Goblin formula. He creates his, and from that he creates his own weapons, or maybe he finds some leftover scrap weapons that he turns into his own weapons. I know the multiverse is being set up, but I'm just really interested to see, because if we see a multiverse Ned Leeds, we don't really know what happened to the old Ned Leeds. Like, he probably gets pushed to the side. But that character's been set up in a way I like, and I want to see him go further. Yeah, I agree with that, because Ned Leeds in the multiverse as a hobgoblin is like a fun Easter egg, basically, right? It's like a fun, like, oh, look, it's fun, it's a nod to his comic origin. While if our Ned Leeds turns into the hobgoblin and gets set on this path of any of the ways in which we discussed, it's a sadder option, for sure, and it's a tougher option. But I think it's the better option, because then that creates long-term consequences for Spider-Man the character, and just overall will shine a really interesting new dynamic to Peter and Ned's relationship. So even though the multiverse is cool, and I think maybe if there's a way for it to do both, maybe there's a version of the multiverse where we see an early version of Ned Leeds as Hobgoblin in the multiverse, right? Like, he's like the evil version, and then it kind of shows how closely these universes are intertwined with each other, that Ned Leeds is kind of set on a path, like, to become the Hobgoblin in a similar way. Then maybe that's an interesting idea to play with if we have a lot of time with the character. But overall, yeah, I think our Ned Leeds should become the Hobgoblin. I do, and I like that pitch a lot. Like, you could have Spider-Man see briefly what Ned could become, and then go back to his own universe and take steps to avoid it. And what's the famous saying? What's the famous saying from I think it's Master Oogway in Kung Fu Panda? It's, one often meets their destiny on the road they take to avoid it. So Peter could be taking these steps to be like, hey Ned, don't turn evil, and actually pushes Ned in his own universe to become the Hobgoblin. Thank you for quoting Kung Fu Panda, and yeah, and also it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know, right? It's like this, and then that shows the very tragic nature of everything that we're trying to do. Hello everyone, welcome to CBR Saga, Spider-Man's favorite show on the internet. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of the most genuine friendships in the MCU, and then we're going to totally rip it apart. That's right, today we're discussing Peter Parker and Ned Leeds, and how the future for Ned might be a little goblin-y. Is Ned destined to become the Hobgoblin in some way, shape, or form? Could this best friend and man in the chair become Peter's arch nemesis? We think it could happen. Join us as we break down this heartbreaking story option, and you can decide if it will happen or not. Let's get started. I'm joined today by my co-host and good friend Nick. Nick, how you doing today?
Doing good, Jacoby. Thank you once again for having me back. Very excited to be here.
Happy to have you. So, okay, I got a big question to ask you. A very important question.
Okay.
If your best friend suddenly turned into your arch nemesis, biggest villain, how would that make you feel on the inside?
Oh, I mean, geez, you're breaking my heart. I guess I would say that while I would not condone their choices and their actions, they are still my best friend. I would wish them well in their future endeavors while trying to kick their butt.
Their future evil endeavors, basically. It's like, you can do your thing. I'm going to stop you, but good luck. You know, I wish you well.
Yeah, you know.
Maybe some of that mindset is going to carry over to the characters that we're talking about today, because we are talking about BFFs, Peter Parker and Ned Leeds. You know, the peanut butter and jelly, salt and pepper, other things that go together. They are just a team. You know, these two. They started off in the MCU.
of enchantment. Come, little children, the time's come to play. Here in my garden of shadows. Follow, sweet children, I'll show thee the way through all the pain and the sorrows. Weep not, poor children, for life is this way, murdering beauty and passion.
Cheated act.
Play all 20 mode for the actual ending.
Hey bros, it's Sans, and I'm sorry, but we didn't have anything planned for this, so enjoy this.
Ever since I was 9, I would be craving alligator penis. I know I'm an abnormal child, but nothing is better than a scaled, long alligator dick. My parents took me to the zoo on my last birthday. I wanted to sit on the main attraction's dick, the huge alligator Joe. They didn't let me, but I got a glimpse at it. It had a huge, massive reptilian cock, full of green slime and sharp scales. I couldn't resist fingering my asshole every time I think about it. I began collecting alligator tongues and inserting them into my tight underage asshole. Every time I feel a snout bump into the inside of my ass, I instantly get a boner. I wish for alligator